Okay, I am quite nervous. I have not performed in a long time. That sounds wrong. And I've not done a public speech. Public speaking is public speech, right? For a very, very long time. So bear with me if I'm a little rusty around the edges. We're going to have a good time this evening, and we are probably not going to agree on all the points that I really enjoyed the last talk, and I think we're going to touch on similar issues here from a very different perspective, and I'm kind of curious what you guys are going to say. So, I also apologize. I use much simpler words than the last speaker, but I speak at the speed of a train. I try to speak slower, and it never usually works. So if I speed up too much, I'll get someone to wave at me. All right, so let's begin with some house rules. First off, I will not be doing comedy this evening, in spite of what the flyer said. I'm basically here for a chat. I was asked to give a talk on comedy, maybe around the theme of cancel culture, and in the end, I'm trying to answer kind of ultimately the question, does comedy have a future? You know, when you're talking about serious topics in comedy, such as cancel culture and political correctness, offensive jokes, they're quite difficult to make lighthearted. And to be honest with you, they're so nuanced that I would need, you know, in this short, I don't have the time or space to really touch upon everything I'd like to touch upon. I would need like a 6-week course to really cover everything about comedy and its future. So Wageningen University, hit me up if that's of interest. Professor Emma, imagine it. No, that's not a good idea. Anyway, now what I am keenly aware of, though, is that throughout the next 3 days of conference or 2 days of conference, you are going to be exposed to a lot of very liberal opinions on comedy. The idea that we shouldn't racially stereotype, the idea that maybe comedy should be curated, that we should use inclusive language. And my aim today is to give you a different opinion. I don't want to change your opinion, but I'd like to give you my side of the story as a comedian to allow you, I guess, to challenge your own assumptions. So here's my proposal. I am going to do a talk of hopefully about 25 minutes, and then we're going to open up for a Q&A. And I want you to challenge me, okay? I want you to ask the difficult questions, and I will try and answer them to the best of my ability. The questions that you are uncomfortable to ask to a comedian, I am here for you. Will I have an answer? Who knows? And if at the end of the day we've had two different sides of the same story told, and we're willing to talk about it, then I will see that as a success. I am surprisingly well placed to talk on this topic because I am both an audience member and a stand-up comedian, which means that, and those are the two parties that really play in the future of comedy, because if one falls out of love with the other, then it's going to be hard to recover from it. And kind of interestingly, the things that, something that really irritates me in life, and this comes from my own side as well as from other people, are something I like to call snap decision opinions. They're opinions that are not formulated through education nor through reasoning. They are solely formulated through feeling, and they're instantaneous, like that. And to maybe try and make things a little bit more tangible, let's give an example. The example could come from cancel culture. Not all cancel culture, but a good chunk of it. In the end of the day, as stand-up comedians, we produce an art form which is intended to be seen in its whole, in its entirety. We do a 1-hour stand-up set, and that's how we intend you to see it. And many times where cancel culture comes from is that one of these little clips, one of these little moments of offense, these little moments of difficult jokes, is taken out from that. It's then picked up by the media, and it is spread all over with headlines like, this comedian is a racist, and it has been taken out of context, among other problems. So, and what scares me more is that I don't have a problem with that theory, the idea behind cancel culture. If you are offended by something and you don't want to be involved with it, that is perfectly okay by me. What worries me is this kind of societal approach of being, see a headline, believe a headline. Because most people who are involved with, this kind of cancel culture, they see the headline and they make up their minds already. Less of them will read the article, even fewer of them will watch the 1-minute clip, and most of them will not see the the entirety of the piece as it was intended to be seen. And this is scary on two fronts, because what's happening is we have two very big camps forming. Camp one is that this is super offensive and I don't want to have anything to do with it. Camp two is this is perfectly okay to talk about and to make fun of. And what we find is that neither side of the conversation is listening to one another. And as both a comedian and as a human, that's scary, because these snap decision opinions, they're not conducive to discussion. They, and it used to be that you like to have a polite conversation, you used to have to just follow the advice of Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, which is to talk about the weather and your health. But then with climate change and COVID-19, even those are not safe bets anymore. And we live in a society whereby every conversation has the possibility to become an argument. Like we have, even the most mundane of topics have people passionately fighting for and against, and it's not normal. Pew Research did a study of 10,000 adults and found out that we are the most polarized we have ever been throughout history. But much more scarily, we are also the least likely to compromise. Well, that means that we're not listening to one another. Similarly, we make decisions based on what we already assume to be true. And again, we're not listening. And conversation is about talking and about listening. And it's a fine balance. And somewhere along the way, we have lost that balance. And here comes an unpopular opinion. As part of the Vatning community, we are a much bigger problem than any of us would like to admit. Because at the end of the day, we are one of the extremist parties. Okay? All it takes is to live here for a year, go back home to wherever is not here, discover that all your friends still eat meat, none of them believe that meat or their car have anything to do with the climate problem, and that one of your prominent family members is probably a racist. It is just, we are pushing forward this green movement because we believe it to be true, that it is to be the part of the future. And similarly, we have a load of people out there who think we're trying to fix something that isn't broken. So once again, we find ourselves with this awkward situation of two sides of one conversation not listening. And here comes the thing. This is where comedy comes into it, all right? Because comedy is the most wonderful art form. It is powerful. It has the possibility to make you stop and to listen, to make you think. It says the things that you don't want to say or that you're too embarrassed to say, and it starts endless numbers of conversation every day. By means of an example, I don't have an audience, but let's pretend I do. Who here, you guys can answer this question, who here can name more of their local council members than they can comedians? Any of you? None of you. And I imagine it's the same for you at home. And why is that relevant, you may ask? Good question. We don't listen to our politicians. That's the sad fact. We don't really listen to them anymore. However, we sure as hell listen to our comedians. We listen to John Oliver, we listen to Trevor Noah, and we listen to Arjen Lubach. I know him. And here's the thing. One of the great reasons for it is because they have created this wonderful art form called Infotainment. Serious news told in an entertaining way. And in doing so, they have created this great thing, which is short and it's punchy and it's funny, which makes it so much more memorable, and it's digestible. And to be honest with you, it's not completely overwhelming, leaving me with 37 years of therapy needed after every news broadcast. It is a powerful art form, and it is, you can tell I feel passionately about it, my heart is racing. It is a powerful art form, and yes, they use humor as a tool. And like all comedians that have gone before them, and all comedians that will come after them, they are pushing the boundaries of what is considered funny, they're pushing the boundaries of what is considered socially acceptable, and there was a last part to this, which was very powerful. There was a forthcoming. Anyway, can I ask you a favor, my lovely friend here? Can you turn me off? That doesn't sound right at all, does it? Not there. Over there on the flippy screen, because I am distracting myself. I clearly have some kind of weird obsession with looking at myself, and I can't do it. This is a lot better. Okay, so Like I was saying, Infotainment, fantastic tool. And what I wanted to say is that they put their heads on the line, because here's the reality, folks. Comedy is hard, okay? It is difficult, it is lonely, it is not terribly fun to do. It's hard in the mind, hard in the soul, and it's terribly hard in the wallet. Genuinely. I would know. But something I want to show you is that comedians are like superheroes, okay? Because we all have interesting backstories. Spider-Man, bit by a radioactive spider. Superman, hey, turns out he's an alien. Aquaman discovers that he can speak to fish for up to an hour. Very specific. And then what happens is they muddle about life, trying to learn how to use these powers and get on with them, and they make mistakes, and they fix them, and they try again, and eventually they become superheroes. There is no superhero school, and there is no comedy school either. There is no comedy school. There are there are art schools and there are drama schools, and art schools teach you the beauty of painting and physical and visual arts, and drama schools teach you how to perform and how to be in theater plays and playwright and dance and sing and use music, but none of them teach you comedy. None of them teach you, in particular, stand-up comedy. Like superheroes, us comedians have to find out how to do it the hard way. You know, even comedy's own origin story is kind of rough. Do any of you know how stand-up comedy got its name? No, because it's an interesting name, stand-up comedy. So it started back in the 1940s when stand-up comedy was slowly coming to be a thing. And comedy was originally part of a big variety show. They would have these 10, 15-minute sets where they could perform sketches and perform character comedy. And in doing so, a few of these comedians, a select few, wanted to kind of scale it back. They wanted to strip back the art form, take away the slapstick, take away the sketches and the costumes, and they wanted to make it just about the art form of the joke, the art form of words. So they went to the variety theatre and they asked, "Can we do this?" And they said no. So they decided to break away from the variety theatre and basically take any venue that would let them perform. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, the only people who would pick them up and give them spots to perform were money laundering, mob-owned casinos. And they got these super short spots, like literally a couple of minutes each. They were basically a distraction, and they were not allowed to sit. And that is how stand-up comedy became a scene. And the thing with, okay, so here's the question for you that you might have. It's like, all right, you can't go to school to do it. How do you become a comedian? How do you go about doing it? Well, I can never say her name, Mayim Bialik, such a good comedian. Amy from The Big Bang Theory, she has a PhD in neuroscience. Who else do we have? Rebel Wilson from Pitch Perfect and many other things. John Cleese from Monty Python, both have law degrees. Rowan Atkinson, also Mr. Bean, he happens to be an electrical engineer. Ken Jeong is a doctor. The list is endless. Comedians come from all walks of life, and that goes both ways. Jim Carrey was a janitor. Whoopi Goldberg, who is my favorite human ever, used to put makeup on dead people in funeral homes, and she was also a phone sex operator, so there we are. Robin Williams was a mime, he was a street performer. Ricky Gervais was actually the frontman of a dance troupe, and Emma Holmes was a food technologist. We are everywhere. What we do share in common is that we all come from the same place. We started the same way, at some open mic night in a dodgy pub, trying to make a bunch of really unenthusiastic strangers laugh in the dark. And the thing is that, because there is no school, because this is, the thing with comedy is that because there is no school, the only way we can learn what is funny is to test it out, to try it out. And yes, that means that sometimes newbie comedians are offensive. It means that sometimes really experienced comedians are offensive too. We have no choice but to try and to fail and to improve. This is our education. And the thing that I think a lot of people forget, and this is where we disagree with the last speaker, whose name I'd like to try and pronounce, but it's got a Dutch G in it, and that's where things go wrong. But the thing we disagree on is that humor and offense are very, very similar on like a chemical level. Humor, like the art of stand-up comedy, is infinitely complex and really difficult and confusing, and it's hard to do, but the thing that is super simple in many ways is that what makes people laugh is actually two things. One is surprise, the other is embarrassment. Those are the two things that most humans laugh at. And similarly, offense comes also from surprise and embarrassment. Take it a step further, a joke is infinitely more funny when we can relate to it, when we feel like we are part of that joke, that we can see someone in that. And just as similarly, offense is so much more hurtful when we relate to it. They are both very personal things. Being a stand-up comedian, it's like walking a tightrope, okay? There is a very, very thin line of what is funny, and then there's two very big empty planes on either side. One is not funny, the other is offense. And we have to learn to walk this tightrope, and we wobble, okay? We wobble and we almost fall off into the not funny category, and sometimes we wobble and we almost fall off into the offensive category. And other times, we full-on faceplant into both of them. Sometimes at the same moment. It is painful. It is proper painful. I think what is so easily forgotten about stand-up comedy is that it's an art form. Okay, it is easy for us to sit there as audience members in the front row of a comedy night and to watch these, nonchalant, charming people go up on stage and talk to me as if they're my best friends. And they chat, and it's natural, and it's relaxed, and it's funny. And they don't rehearse, right? They just get up there, and then out spills these jokes and these amazing stories. And, what you forget is that is very much part of the act, is to make it look like it is we are just talking off the top of our heads, as if this is just dawned on us right now. That is part of stand-up comedy. That is part of the act. It's part of the art. The number of times after shows that people have come up to me and gone, "He is such a natural." And I'm like, no, he works really hard to be good at comedy. Okay? He works really hard. He works proper hard to do it. Like, we, as comedians, we write jokes and we fail jokes and we improve jokes and we try again and we do it. And the circle goes on. We improve, we fail, we improve, we fail. And it just keeps going until eventually we perfect the joke. And then, because society is mean, even comedic perfection is hugely subjective, all right? You and me, we do not share the same sense of humor, okay? We have two very different senses of humor depending on our upbringing, our socio-political beliefs, our age, where we're from, what we understand of language. Humor means so many different things. So comedic perfection is actually, it's perfection for a very small slice of society at a very specific time. That is comedic perfection. And that we very easily forget. So, now you've heard all that, you must be wondering, why on earth are you a stand-up comedian? It's a very good question, and I ask myself this regularly. I don't know what possessed me. I genuinely don't. I think it must have been ego. There is nothing else that it could have been. In the run-up to a particular moment in time, which made me agree to do a stand-up comedy night, I had a few friends who had, over the past month in this running up, had gone, Emma, have you ever thought about doing your stories on stage? Because you're kind of funny, I tell you what, the more you hear that, the more you believe it, okay? Confirmation bias. And I was already kind of, something was going on. I was like, okay, maybe I'm funny. Because that's how life works. And then I did something, I'm a Facebook comedian, okay? So I posted on Wageningen Student Plaza, I posted a bike, okay? I was selling my bike, and I gave it a name, and I gave it characteristics and a story, and it was kind of amusing, and I was like, all in the name of sales, okay? And then this random guy contacts me and goes, hey, you seem like a funny gal, do you do stand-up comedy? And I was like, no, not really. And he goes, well, we have an open mic coming up, would you consider doing it? And I was like, well, I hadn't thought about it before, but yeah, totally. And instantly regretted this decision. I have never wanted to backpedal so hard, okay? Within half an hour, was sweating. all right? I was like, I need to tell him that I can't do this. Who the hell, what is this? A moment of madness? Self-adoration? What's going on with me? I can't do this. And I was like, but then he's a stranger and I'm English and I feel awkward at the best of times and I can't tell him that I don't want to do it because that's kind of rude. And basically out of politeness, I became a stand-up comedian. So here's the thing, the next 6 weeks of my life in the run-up to that event were the worst I have ever experienced. I hated myself, I hated other people, I felt sick the entire time. I was like, what am I doing with my life? But I'm a strong, independent woman and I pushed through it. And I went and I performed and irritatingly, I got the biggest high I have ever had before and possibly will ever have again afterwards, and I was completely and utterly hooked. Which is annoying, all right? And the thing is, I did the whole stand-up comedy journey that I've just told you about. I would travel to events and I would perform. I'd go for 2.5-hour train rides one way to perform for at maximum 10 minutes, most of the time less, and then travel all the way home. I would write and I would rewrite and I'd improve and I'd try to get better. And within a year, I had made an established name for myself in the very specific international comedy in the Netherlands scene. But I had not made a name for myself as a stand-up comedian. I had made a name for myself as an MC, a master of ceremonies, a host, the glue that holds the bit together in the middle. A bit like what happened earlier. That's what happened, the glue. And one of the reasons I had done this is because of my improvisation, the ability to get up and, in essence, talk about nothing to people. And the reason I think that I was good at it is because I got this terrible adrenaline rush every time. I was like, oh my God, I don't have a show, what am I going to do? Okay, we better work it out, and that was a driving force for me. But in doing so, I was slowly performing stand-up comedy less and less. And I decided that I kind of need to take like a conscious step back and work on my stand-up. But the thing is, when I decided to take the step back, the media took a step up, and I decided to become really confused. So during my step back, I had planned to take the time to write more, to get things out there. But just as this was happening, we suddenly saw a lot of headlines coming out about these huge name comedians who are being, facing massive backlash for one joke in their entire set. 90s sitcoms getting cancelled because what was considered okay then is no longer considered okay now. And as a young comedian, that was terrifying because what ended up happening is I couldn't write. I was filtering myself before I would even put my pen to the paper. And it was worrisome. It was worrisome in a much bigger way. It was worrisome. I started to worry about things that were completely out of my control, but felt like huge societal issues. Like, for example, how do you teach kids to have a sense of humor if you don't let them make mistakes? I couldn't get my head around that. Any comedian will tell you that you will be offensive at some point. And kids learning to be funny are offensive. We need to teach them after the fact. We can't cut them off before because you will lose all that potential. Similarly, what happens if we keep cancelling things? We are exposed to less variety. And in doing so, I was afraid that we'd all become the same person. And that is a really scary prospect because as humans, we need to be challenged. We need to face difficult conversations. And in cancelling things, we're not having difficult conversations. We're avoiding difficult conversations. And that didn't feel okay. I felt like, for me, at least from my perspective, I would much rather sit through something that offended me if it left me thinking than to watch everything that was kind of okay for everyone. I never thought I would develop as a person. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there's no tasteless comedy out there, that there's no offensive comedians out there, because of course there is. That's why freedom of speech exists. In the same way that the artist has a right to produce provocative art, you have a right to critique it. But it goes both ways, and we must remember this. And in many ways, like, now it's not my own face distracting me, it's just me distracting myself. It's something I feel so passionately about, and that's why it becomes difficult to talk about, because you end up overthinking everything. You want to show all the nuances, and you want to show everything like this. But Yeah, so freedom of speech exists for a reason, and to be honest with you, if we were to go back to our example of cancel culture, we can talk about a few little things here. The first one is that I think Donald Glover, you may know Donald Glover, he is a very prolific comedian. He's a young African-American comedian. He's known for his work on Community, Atlanta. He's also Childish Gambino, an incredibly accomplished musician. He does not struggle with money, unlike the rest of us. But he put something of culture which I thought was very prominent, which was, and I'm going to quote him because I think it's wrong not to quote them, we're getting boring stuff because people are afraid of getting cancelled. So they feel they can only experiment with aesthetic. And what worries me is that I feel that this problem should not be solved by cutting off the source. Because like I said, that stops the conversation. What we should be doing is we should be getting offended. And we should be then taking a moment to have these awkward conversations and to improve as a society, to push, to learn from these moments. He also said, in the same talk that he's sick of white people cancelling things on my behalf. And I thought it was a very prominent comment because as a member of the LGBT community, surprise if anyone didn't know, and as a woman, I'm also sick of people cancelling things on my behalf. I want to be offended. I want to sit there and make up my own mind about how I feel. And then if I'm not okay with it, it's up to me to go and challenge it. As humans, we are not meant to be comfortable. That's not how humanity progresses. We are meant to be uncomfortable. We are meant to experience difficult things and to improve from them. And yes, we make mistakes. And yes, we should learn from these mistakes. We should apologize for these mistakes, but we should also forgive ourselves for making them. So here's the big question, right? Does comedy have a future? It's not for me to answer, really. I knew when I gave that question in as a title that it should have a yes or a no answer. I knew that everything, it would not be a yes or no answer. There's nothing, nothing related to it. And I want you to know that I can't make you feel a certain way about a piece of stand-up comedy, but you should, and you should have all the right in the world to feel a certain way about a piece of comedy. If we didn't make you feel anything, then we're doing our jobs wrong. But what I will put to you is, I'll put to you this idea. Sometimes we are genuinely offended, but other times, are we really offended, or are we just scared and afraid to hear something that maybe needs to be said? Because at the end of the day, comedy is art. And that was me.